Good day. The state of Florida is popular for a lot of things. Disney World. It also has beautiful beaches, good weather, and it has a world-renowned environmental area called the Everglades. The Everglades is beautiful. It has a lot of wildlife. But a few decades back, something happened to the Everglades. Pythons, Burmese pythons were inadvertently introduced into the Everglades. You see, Burmese pythons are not natural to the Everglades. So what do? They are apex predators. They come from, as the word says, Burma, from Asia. They were introduced into the Everglades as exotic pets. And being that they are apex predators, it didn't take them long. They started to enjoy the buffet of the wildlife they found there. Local raccoons and animals within the Everglades started to disappear. Rabbits, all those small things, they stood no chance. Because you see, the Burmese python is an invasive species. Invasive species are very powerful. They come with a lot of advantages that local species don't yet or haven't yet developed. And ultimately, they do a lot of environmental damage because they are they decimate the local ecosystem that had a balance within itself. So the Burmese python became a problem to the state of Florida. So the state of Florida now put a competition, very innovative competition, to try and get people to come and capture this Burmese python. This competition has been going on for a number of years. And just a few days ago, or a week or two ago, it emerged that this year's competition has ended. And guess who won? It was a lady. It was a lady. Her name is Taylor Stanberry. She received $10,000 for her effort. She bagged a total of 60 snakes. She alone. Incidentally, she's not so tall, but she was able to grab 60 snakes. She did a very good job of capturing these snakes, and she and her husband have a team, and they helped to remove quite a lot of it, and she made a lot of money from catching these snakes. It is not only snakes that are invasive species. Sometimes invasive species can be man. Man particularly has been very destructive to environments that they move to. In 1492, Christopher Columbus discovered America, and subsequently, the Spaniards, having discovered this new land, sent some expedition to come and explore the land. Hernan Cortes, that was the first conquistador, that's what they call them, conquistadors. He came and he introduced himself to the Mayans in Mexico. But in coming, he had some immunity, some diseases. He came with smallpox. They came with a lot of diseases that they had been coping with in the old world. But when they brought them to the new world, the locals in the new world could not cope. That was also besides the fact that they came with superior technology, guns. They decimated the local population, conquered them, and dominated them. They were an invasive species that took over the whole of South America because subsequently there was another expedition to Peru. The same thing too happened in Australia. The British sent quite a lot of people there and the local population was decimated. Same also happened in South Africa. South Africa, Dutch settlers from the East Indian Company settled there, and they too also had the superior advantage of having a technology, and they did short work of the locals there. In fact, they continued to several generations to the point where in the 1940s and 1950s, they actually instituted apartheid and controlled the people until the world stood out against them. So what we get here is that man inserting himself into a local environment can sometimes dominate that environment because it's an invasive species. I don't want to talk about what happened in America, where people from the New World ultimately came, met the local Indian community. We know what happened to them. From a population of over 5 million, they are lucky now to even count themselves in the hundreds of thousands. And this is 2025. They were decimated. They lost their war with the American colonizers and settlers. It's worse when the human invasive species wants to colonize your environment. They like it and they want to settle there. And that was just what has happened in the Middle East. The Middle East is an interesting place. For over 600 years, it was dominated by an empire called the Ottoman Empire. But by World War I, the Ottoman Empire was waning, and there was two empires that were in Europe that were strong and significant, and those were the French and the British Empire. They wanted the lands of the Ottoman Empire, and they got it eventually. They used subterfuge. They used the local population there. And in trying to reward, one of the things they tried to do to undermine the British, particularly to undermine the Ottoman Empire and the whole of the Ottoman Empire, was to promise a lot of things to a lot of people. Ultimately, they had their eyes on a very powerful group of people who had for several years, several centuries, been hoping to go back to their homeland as they see it. They were called the Zionists. They're mainly Jews. They're called the Zionists. And that particular aspiration comes off the Bible, where it has been said that they were dispersed. History says that the Jews were dispersed from the Middle East long ago by the Romans, even by Nebuchadnezzar. And they've had this history of being dispersed. So they always hoped to come back to the Middle East. And in the year 1917, it finally happened. In 1917, there was a declaration by the British called the Balfour Declaration that created the Jewish state, the Jewish homeland as we know it now. It was the resettling of Jews from all over the world into a Jewish homeland in the Palestine. And ultimately, in 1948, it created the Jewish state, as we know now today as Israel. Good day, and welcome to my channel, Ibima Amungo's perspective on global affairs. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. If you have any comments regarding the views I express in this video, please put them in the comment section. Do well to like and share. In 1917, there was a declaration by the Foreign Secretary then of the British Empire called Lord Balfour. He was once a prime minister and eventually became the foreign minister by the time of this. He was a Zionist. He believed also, he was a Christian Zionist who believed that the Jews should have a place in their homeland. And in November 2nd of 1917, he wrote a letter that we call today the Balfour Declaration, where he says, he wrote this letter to a very prominent Jewish banker in London because it's not a new thing to pander to the influence of the Jews, especially since they dominate finance, and finance is very important to persecute wars and to prosecute a lot of agendas. So he wrote this letter to Lord Rothschild, Lionel Rothschild particularly. I have much pleasure in convening to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspiration, which has been submitted to and approved by the cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this objective. it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you will bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. By that declaration, the British signed on the death knell of the Palestinians Arabs because they were already existing there. And it wasn't long that shiploads of Jews who had suffered pogrom and who were also part of the British aspiration for British conquest of World War I, especially as they were fighting the Russians. The Russians were on one side with the Germans and the Ottomans, and they were fighting the Russians, and the Russians went out of that war. The Ottomans lost a lot of their property, and the Middle East was where their property was. The inheritors of that property ultimately became the British and the French. And they divvied up that whole land that the Ottoman gave and created countries that we now know as Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Jordan. So the British were a force of the creation of a new reality in the Middle East. The Balfour Declaration inserted the Jewish population forcefully into this equation and this place that had been predominantly Muslim. That is not to say there were not Jews there. The Jewish intelligentsia was very important in supporting the British, but this is what happened. And since then, contrary to the statements and aspirations of this particular declaration that the rights of the locals should be taken care of, it has not turned out that way. There was Nakba. In fact, the Palestinians were chased out of Palestine after a while because the Palestinians found themselves in they did not know the group of people who were coming into them to meet them. In several waves, hardened war veterans from the wars of the world wars, of the First World War and eventually the Second World War. The Second World War, the wave of immigrants that came in from Soviet Union, from Eastern Europe, from all the persecutions of Germany, who had fought underground against the Germans, they were hardened. And when they came ultimately poured into the Palestinian lands, the Palestinians had no hope there. And besides, they were also funded by the Zionist movement that is very powerful. One of the intentions of the British in promoting that declaration was to win the favor of America, get them to join the war. And ultimately, America did join the war because it's not today. It's been a long time that the Israeli lobby has been powerful in the American state. Today, it emerged that one of the news we got to see today was one that is very sad. The news is of famine that is taking place now in Gaza. It was reported today, there was a UN report, and it was in the papers today, it was in BBC, that famine in Gaza is a failure of humanity. The United Nations Secretary General feels that it is a failure of humanity that the events in Gaza has turned to the point where there is now famine in Gaza. He said this when the report came out. Antonio Guterres said the situation was a man-made disaster after a UN-backed body, which identifies hunger levels around the world, raised its food insecurity status in parts of territory to phase 5, the highest and most severe. The integrated food security phase classification says more than 500,000 people across Gaza are facing catastrophic conditions characterized by starvation and destitution and death. The events in Gaza has dominated the news. It's not safe if you're a YouTuber or if you're in America to be calling Israel any name. Even if you are the ICC or the United Nations, there's a pushback. You may be called anti-Semitic, or the full force, you feel the full brunt of the Israeli lobby on you. You cannot stand it. They dominate every single facet of American life. They hold America seriously. Now there's a discussion going on. Are politicians being voted for America first or for Israel first? That is now the big debate, because for the first time, Americans are doing some introspection as to the hold of the Israeli lobby on their political class. It has led to a situation where before us we are seeing what people call genocide. We are seeing famine, and we are seeing skeletal children, we are seeing starvation of whole populations, and now there's an invasion going on of Gaza. The Israeli army cabinet has approved the complete and total occupation of Gaza. There's a lot of Jewish pushback in America. Not everybody buys into the Zionist project, and quite a lot of Jews are making a lot of noise. Jeffrey Sachs, a lot of them. In Columbia University, there's a lot of demonstration going on. In Harvard University, across America, what is going on in Israel is in Gaza is a sting on them, especially as they remember the Holocaust and what happened to them in the Holocaust. Even the Israeli people now demonstrate every day as to how they have come to this point. Many of them don't want what's going on. And many of them see that the continued action, the decimation of the Palestinians, over 500,000 of them have been killed. Nobody is coming to their help. The power of America, America is the only country standing, and that's all they need. It is one, America with us is mightier than all 150 countries of the world against Israel. That's how powerful Americans stand with Israelis. They give them diplomatic cover in the United Nations, and they give them political cover every other place. But that is not all. They give them military arsenal. It emerged in one of the YouTube videos I was watching that when the F-35 project was done, America wanted to create a variant for just exclusive to America, and then they sell to other countries. The Israelis insisted that they wanted the very fighter jets that America rides, and that is what they got. They have that power. They get continuous access to bombs, the very best, 2,000-ton bombs. They get the very, very best of 2-ton bombs. They get the best of American weaponry and American technology, and nobody there stands in their way. It was just that in trying to start a war with Iran, they seem to have beaten a little bit more than they could chew. But since they got inserted into that neighborhood, it has not been joyous for the people of that neighborhood. Already, there are 2 points of view here. One says that Israel is using the Americans for their own interest. Another says that the Americans are using Israel to pacify the Middle East and keep the Arab populations there worried, so that they would always be within the sphere and orbit of America. Whatever it is, the people of Gaza are suffering. Today, it emerged that, contrary to what we may have heard, the unilateral action that may have wiped out the whole of the decision-making centers of Ukraine was vetoed by President Putin. President Putin, contrary to what a lot of people have said, has shown such humanity regarding bombing the people of Kiev. Very, very contrary, very, very contrary to the narrative put out by the mainstream media, and contrary also to the images people are seeing from Gaza. So today we got to learn from no less a person than the president of Belarus that there was some members of the Russian political class were asking for President Putin to take action against Zelensky and his team. In fact, what they wanted was that they wanted a situation where President Putin would have ordered an Oreshnik strike, an Oreshnik strike on the people of the decision centers in Kiev. But this is what he said.
Кстати, инсайдерская вам информация. Такие у кого-то замыслы были в России, не буду называть. Путин сказал, ни в коем случае. Они были готовы нанести, если бы ахнули орешником по центрам принятия решения, там бы ничего не осталось. Но Путин, вот как это они нас называют, мы вдвоем эти. Да, агрессоры, но тем не менее, видите, как агрессор поступил. Первый раз, когда они вошли в Киев, он говорит, я не могу пить по детским садам и школам. И когда там уже консенсус почти был, что надо с Украиной решать и нанести удар по центрам принятия решения, вот он сказал, нет, этого делать не надо. После того, как они орешником нанесли удар, украинцы поняли, беда. А мы уже еще попал. Kстати.
So there it is. The Ukrainians realize that the Oreshnik could put them in a lot of trouble. But that we don't seem to feel that people are afraid of the Oreshnik, despite how the power of that particular weapon system that we saw recently when it was used against one of the missile manufacturing facilities in the in one of the provinces of Ukraine. I met a Ukrainian who I asked him, where are you from? And he said he's from, I think, Dnipropetrovsk. I think that's the province or the oblast, they call it. And I said, that's one of the oblasts that is very close to the theater of war, the line of contact. And he said, yes, he's not so sure if in a few years' time, he will be saying it's Russian or it's Ukrainian. That's how it is now. The war is progressing at a pace that is making a lot of people worry. But it just also emerged that, contrary to what a lot of people thought, one of the findings, one of the outcomes of, there was actually no outcome between President Trump and the Europeans and Zelensky. Because Lavrov had an interview where he said that following that interview, that meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky, it became very clear. President Zelensky said no to all the statements that Trump put for him and told him about the Russian conditions, and he said no to them. And when he said no to them, what he was saying is that since they were not agreeing, and since the Russians were also very far away from them, there may be no need for a meeting. Lavrov made stress this point when he spoke to an American TV channel and said there is no need for a meeting between President Zelensky and President Putin because they are far away from each other and there's no agenda to discuss.
He said clearly that he is ready to meet, provided this meeting is really going to have an agenda, presidential agenda.
So that's a big if. There's no meeting planned, Mr. Foreign Minister. That's a big if. You're saying there's no meeting planned right now.
Kristen, I'm awfully sorry, you're not listening. There is no meeting planned, and I'm not challenging this. But you cannot, I think, understand what I am saying. Putin is ready to meet with Zelensky when the agenda would be ready for a summit. And this agenda is not ready at all.
So bottom line, there's
so
no meeting.
Yeah, it is. The Russians said Zelensky said no to almost all the requests that Putin put forward to President Trump. President Trump is in a bind now. So what is President Trump doing? He tweeted today, he put out on social media that he has an announcement, a very big announcement coming up in 2 weeks. President Trump has got to the point where he has come to realize that the hatred driving the Ukraine war is not as simple as he thinks. There is, on the one hand, the people of Western Ukraine, the ones who had no Russian affiliation and who have had this Ukrainian identity and who wanted to be closer to the people of the West, and now who have made themselves available to the Western Europeans as their proxies, are very far away from where the Russians are. And when they came with with Zelensky to the Oval Office, they impressed upon Zelensky to stand his ground. And in fact, they ratcheted up their request and put up a lot of requests that was far, 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 far in excess of even what they had always requested for. And for that, now we see Trump is coming to appreciate that he may have to take a decision. What decision will President Trump take? Should he leave the war? Anyhow, whatever decision he takes will ultimately not be beneficial to Ukraine. Because one thing I have said repeatedly, the one thing I know President Trump will not do is fund this Ukraine war, give Ukraine money, give Ukraine intelligence. He does not have that hatred that drove Biden. Biden was filled with hate beyond belief. He had attempted to try and start this war under Obama as vice president because somehow the remit of Ukraine fell under him. It was outsourced to him by President Obama. And when he wasn't having his way in Ukraine, he came back and tried to influence Obama to fund the Ukrainians and start a war with the Russians. Obama pushed back against it and said that the Russians had escalatory dominance in that neighborhood and he wouldn't go for it. But when he got the opportunity to be the president, he implemented everything. After his summit with President Putin, Biden and Putin did have a summit. And in that summit, all he did was kept on threatening Putin. And Putin told him that his stance and his position was a mistake. It wasn't long after, like a month after that summit or two after, the war was, the special military operation was started. And this is where we find ourselves now. President Trump has said that war would never have happened under him. And indeed, it is true. Putin did actually acknowledge that that war would not have happened after him. Today, also, it emerged that the Russians are manufacturing arms at an output that even half of the year gone, they've already met up almost their whole requirements for the whole year, the whole budgetary allocations and all their quotas that they were supposed to meet for the whole year. They've already met all of it, and they are producing so much. This information came out when the Rostock CEO, Rostock is a big arms manufacturer in Russia, and they are the state-owned. Russia has successfully maintained its state-owned organizations. Russia and China are some of the countries that put a lie to the Western statement that the state cannot run organizations. In fact, in Africa, we also have one state-owned organization that is preeminent, number one in aviation. It's called Ethiopian Airlines, and they are a state-owned organization, run very well, and probably the most profitable organization in Ethiopia. So the Russian state has a company called Rostock, and the GM of Rostock was just putting out today the amazing amount of numbers of output of military warfare, military arsenal that they have made. They've met up their quota. We have delivered 65% of our annual plan to the troops. His name is Sergei Chemizov, the CEO of state-owned defense conglomerate Rostock. He told Ria Rovosti in an interview published this same Friday that they are producing at an output that has shocked the Westerners. So this war is ongoing. The Russians and the Ukrainians are far off from each other, very far off. And Donald Trump has found himself in a quagmire. It's whatever decision he takes, it will be lambasted. If he removes his hands from the war and says, washes his hands off the war, oh, he has sold off the Ukrainians and given the victory to Putin. If he continues to support Putin, then, support Zelensky, then there goes his aspiration for his peace, for his peace award. He may get the plaudits of the neocons and the people who are the bipartisan supporters of Ukraine. But what he may not get is a victory in that war, because definitely the Russians have won the war already, and they will affirm and consolidate and make sure the victory is total under Donald Trump. Donald Trump is going to be the leader of a lost cause anyhow, and whatever decision he takes. This is where I end my video for today. If you think that Donald Trump will wash his hands of this war, or if you think he should wash his hands of the war, or he should continue to support Ukraine, whatever decision you think Donald Trump should take, because he's at decision point. He says he will do that decision in 2 weeks. We are waiting for him. Maybe he will change his mind again, announce that it will be 3 days or 2 days, or we extend it. Whatever decision he think he should take, please put it in the comment section. As regards to the famine in Gaza, there's nothing we can do. They are by far stronger people, but there's growing refrain for support for the Palestinians and support for and the condemnation of all that Israel is doing. We are seeing scenes that really break the heart in this time and in this age. Pray for the people of Gaza. That's all I can say. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe and do well to like and share. Until I see you in my next video. Goodbye.